institutional collaboration between the Woltemade Center, OWU Connection, DEC OWU, and the Economics and Business Department that expands the scope and impact of the entrepreneurial education and opportunities at OWU. The Latham Bishop Ventures program was created with a gift of time, talent, and treasure from OWU alumna Carol Latham, class of 1961. A chemistry major at Ohio Wesleyan, Latham is the retired founder, president, and CEO of Thermagon, Inc., a custom manufacturer of high-performance heat transfer materials for electronic components. Under her leadership, Thermagon grew to sales of $18 million annually worldwide. Please remember to sign in to every session you attend today using the QR codes in every room. This is how we are taking attendance. So if you have not already signed in for the Big Problem Challenge, please do so now. They're at each entrance to the room. And if you were here from the Environmental Symposium, you will have to sign in again. Many faculty members require proof of attendance, so checking in will ensure you get credit for attending. We are also using attendance figures for future programming and assessment of the conference. I would now like to welcome Matt Volrath, Faculty Director of the Woltemade Center and Professor of Business Administration.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. So we're trying to pack a lot in to 45, 50 minutes, so we're going to get right to it. This is the Big Problem Challenge, and the premise is that we are trying to solve an environmental problem, water pollution in Lake Erie and the Ohio River, so water pollution in Ohio, with entrepreneurial ideas. So these teams are pitching some sort of vision for a business venture that will simultaneously be financially viable and sustainable and address this problem of water pollution. We have 4 judges with us from the community today. We are really grateful that they're here. Thank you for your time. We have Brian Steyer. He's a business instructor at Dublin City Schools, a lot of experience in education and also in the corporate world. We have Lisa Roberts from the City of Delaware. She's the Watershed and Sustainability Coordinator for the city. And if you were here for the Environmental Resource Symposium, you just got to hear from her. And we have Lauren Richards, who is a natural resource management specialist from Preservation Parks. She does a lot of work with ecological restoration projects and thinking about managing natural resources. And then we have Phil Smith, who is the director of the Entrepreneurial Center, the Delaware Entrepreneurial Center, the DEC, and is a familiar face on campus and is casting a vision for building our DEC into something even bigger and more helpful and empowering for you, our students. So our format today, we have 5 teams presenting. There were 11 teams that submitted proposals, and these teams were selected by a committee of 6 evaluators as the most promising proposals. Each team has 5 minutes to make their pitch, and then we'll have about 2 minutes for questions. Time's tight, so we're gonna stick to those parameters. So we'll go ahead and kick off with our first team, which is Tara Buffer. Come on up, and thanks for participating.
Problem is that out of all the Great Lakes, Lake Erie is the most affected by urbanization and the growth of the agricultural industry. And one of these problems is the agricultural runoff from these local farms by Lake Erie that are exacerbating the harmful algal blooms in the Lake Erie water supply and also polluting the water supply going into those Lake Erie communities. These are negatively impacting these local farmers because it is depleting the soil quality, it's also reducing the usable land for crops, and is reducing the overall crop yields for these farmers. And this is a map of the stress index of the Great Lakes. If we take a look into Lake Erie specifically, we see a lot of those areas touching Ohio are in the red 100% areas of water pollution. And out of those areas that is touching Ohio, most of that land use in the northernmost part of Ohio is for agricultural purposes.
And so if we zoom in here and you look at that purple line right there, that is our target market. So a lot of this land across Ottawa, Lucas, and Sandusky counties are all agricultural farmland. These are rural communities. And so this is really where our business model is going to take off. And so this is where Tara Buffer comes into play. Terra Buffer is a seasonal landscaping company. We work with farmers to preserve the farmland and develop it into future generations. We operate out of Sandusky, primarily Ottawa, Lucas, and Sandusky counties, all of which border Lake Erie and all of which are significant contributors to its water pollution. Essentially, the way that our business model works is we grow native Ohio plants in our greenhouses, sell those plants to farmers, and then plant them on their farmland in the form of buffer strips.
And so what are buffer strips? Buffer strips are these natural barriers constructed of native plants that are placed on the edges of farmland which border any kind of water supply like rivers or lakes. And the native plants are especially important because native plants have evolved over time to be more resistant to sediments and toxins in the pesticides that we use. And the distinct zones of these buffer strips are designed to filter and absorb different types of sediment and runoff as it leaves the farm. And so the process of Terra Buffer, before we go into it, is going to start in our greenhouses. We will be growing native plants in our greenhouses. We will then be selling our native plants to Ohio farmers at slightly higher than market rates. We will then be installing and monitoring these buffer strips on farmland using our native plants. We will turn a profit and improve the water and soil quality on these farms, which will be measured by our partnership with the Ohio Sea Grant. The Ohio Sea Grant is just going to be an environmental assessment of how much our buffer strips are improving the water pollution going into Lake Erie.
And so I really wanted to highlight our partner relationships and how important these are in actually sustaining Terra Buffer. So first and foremost, it's really all about the farmers. That is our customer, that's our clientele, it's going to be who's purchasing our services, and so we really want to make sure that we're really fostering that relationship. However, there are also a few other relationships that I want to highlight, mainly our plant providers, which includes online plant subscription services, essentially, like Urban Farmer, Ohio Prairie's Nursery, and Riverside Nature Trees. Those are where we're actually going to buy the plants that we grow in our greenhouses. Also, online recruiting websites, you think Indeed, ZipRecruiter, to hire our part-time landscapers to actually install these buffer strips. And finally, local 4-H groups in high schools. Now, you'll notice that we starred both farmers and local 4-H groups here, and that's for a very important reason. These relationships are active partner relationships. We want to make sure that we're giving back to our local communities and involving 4-H students and obviously farmers in the process of sustainable farming. And so we actually broke down the cost structure a little bit of how much it would take to get Terra Buffer off the ground. In terms of our fixed costs, we're looking at about $53,000. This can be covered by a small bank loan. It includes anything from our company trucks to our work tools, anything like that. Our variable costs, and this is on an annual per year basis, is going to be on the low end about $63,000, on the high end about $95,000. This kind of just varies based on how much business we get from farmers and how much we have to tweak our hours worked. And so in terms of the pricing, how much we're actually charging farmers for this, there's going to be an initial consultation, which is going to be free, which is competitive with market rates, and which is even more competitive with market rates is the semi-annual maintenance. So we will come back halfway through the year and ensure that these buffer strips are functioning properly. Another way that we're going to, this is really the first way that we're going to make some of our revenue, is by upcharging some of these plants. So it's not going to be very much, but it's just a way that we kind of stay competitive in the market. And finally, this is where we get a lot of our revenue is from the actual installation of the buffer strips themselves. So Ohio State actually estimated that on average, it's about $233 per acre annually to install and maintain buffer strips. And so this is the fee that we're going to charge to farmers. And yeah.
And these estimates are going to vary, but we will need to service approximately 34 farms on an annual basis to match those variable costs on our low end. And out of the Ottawa, Lucas, and Sandusky counties that we are sourcing, there are 1,701 local farms in that target market. And so now we wanted to open it up for questions and comments from the judges. We did good.
Saline Solutions.
Do you want us to stand up here?
Yes. Or come on over and answer questions.
One of my questions is how do you approach the farmers and get them to adopt into your program? Sometimes it's easy for them to continue the practices that they're working on because it's going to come at a cost to them in order to install native plants. So how are you going to convince them or get them to buy into your program?
Absolutely. So this is going to involve our marketing plan. And the way to do that, I think, first starts with 4-H groups, because 4-H groups and farmers are very close, as well as FFA groups. And so the big thing, I think the way that we're going to get into the ears of farmers is by advertising, creating a website, you know, creating some of those ways that we can actually streamline communication and get in contact with farmers. I also know that in Sandusky County, it's a huge farming community, and so there are a lot of opportunities and events related to farming that would be good places to sort of go to and, you know, make those in-person connections.
And our business model is also based on education as well. When we would go and consult these farmers or meet them at any of these events in Sandusky counties, we would be able to talk to them about how our business practice in these buffer strips would be sustainable for their farmland itself. Installing these buffer strips will actually renew the soil on their land and prevent runoff from further damaging and eroding their properties. So by implementing these buffer strips in Terra Buffer, they would actually be improving the soil quality on their farms and would also increase the amount of viable land they would be able to use for crops. And we can measure that success by looking at, on a yearly basis, how much crops they're able to produce and the quality of those crops as well.
Thank you.
I like your model a lot. The fact that you're saying, I'm going to grow them for you and install them, I think that's a unique kind of piece to it. Have you guys thought through a little bit about how often I would need for you to like put in a new buffer strip? Because if you're saying there's about 1,700 farms, once I maybe have reached half of those or more of those, are you able to come back in a couple years and put more in? Or is this more like a one-time, I'm kind of getting a buffer strip and then I don't need you unless you're coming back for maintenance type of stuff?
No, that's a very good question. And so this is why our model is so sustainable, is because annually these buffer strips need to be maintained. This is a process of us coming back, reassessing, you know, the strength of the buffer strips. Actually, so the way it's set up is in zones, which I think we explained. That first zone actually takes a lot of beating in the first year because a lot of that runoff is actually destroying those plants. And so especially within the first, like, I'd say 2 to 3 years, maintaining that first layer is going to be really important. And so making it clear to farmers that this isn't a one and done kind of thing, which isn't necessarily bad because it means that we can come back and monitor this and make sure that their crop yields are continuing to be healthy and also profitable for them. And so going into the future, I think that's sort of the beauty of the model. You know, we're sustaining our business model into the future.
What size buffer are you expecting per acreage of farm? You're saying it's $233 an acre annually to install it, but what size land are you asking the farmer to give up that's profitable to them that will now be lost profit?
So in terms of buffer strips, the usual width of a buffer strip kind of ranges from 20 to 30 meters of land based on their acreage. So we wouldn't actually be taking up a ton of their land space per acre. We would only also be planting these buffer strips at the very edge of their land. And most of the time when farmers do plant crops, they don't approach the edges of riverbanks because it can be subject to erosion as anyway. And so we would only be taking up about 20 to 30 meters of land there, and that can be maintained without interrupting their flow of crops as well.
Hello, we are Saline Solutions, and our action plan is to reduce runoff by creating a consulting firm that is going to reduce the amount of salt we're putting on roads by using GIS software to map out optimal routes and then figure out what is the best type of salt to be using for that particular area.
So just a brief overview of our project. Our objective, or the problem we're looking to solve, is reducing the effects that salt runoff has on aquatic ecosystems, specifically salt that comes from road salt. The method we would use for this would be selective application of road salt and the use of alternate substrates or substances as opposed to road salt. To apply this, we would likely build a consulting agency. And we feel confident that we could implement this through our experience in salt application, GIS, and riparian restoration. We would have two main customer bases. The first would be governmental. This would likely be the bulk of our customers as they are doing the most salting on roads. We would reach them through a primary focus group and focus on maximizing their ecosystem services and streamlining public safety. Our second customer base would be private companies, and we would focus on cutting their costs and enhancing the public's perception of their company.
Okay, so another way that we're planning to do outreach is through advertising and consultations. So we would be meeting individually with local municipalities, talking about what services we can provide for them and how much impact we can have. We would also be attending city or town council meetings so we can meet individually with people in the community, get their feedback, and see how driven they are to have a more sustainable community.
So where's all the profit from this coming from? So essentially our plan is to use the savings margins provided by reducing the amount of salt that is being applied. So by buying a bunch of salt and putting it all on all the roads, you're spending a lot of money on salt, and you're not really optimizing your use of it. So by figuring out specifically what type of substrate is best for your particular climate, your particular area, and is kind of the least ecologically harmful, we can fit in a lot of budget savings. And by marketing those budget savings, we can then in turn use that profit margin as our consulting fees, etc. And also we're going to potentially boost sales for our clients because a lot of people like more eco-friendly products nowadays. So if, for instance, a county decides that they want to use us, they can then market the fact that, hey, we're taking steps to reduce our salt runoff into Lake Erie, and that can reflect well on various candidates, etc. This is a study done in South Korea that was looking at different types of salt types and comparing their effectiveness in different dilutions. So there are basically two main ways to apply salt. You can either put it down as a just physical solid, or you can put it down as a liquid. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. Essentially, where you're going to put the salt matters greatly for what you're going to do. So you need someone who knows what they're doing in order to tell you what you need to apply in a particular area.
Okay, so then getting on to the environmental impact. So this is a study done by our very own Dr. Downing, and it's using Canadian and American salt concentration levels that are allowable within our within the country. So we have 230 milligrams of chlorine, or that's one of the atoms that makes up salt, per milliliter of water. So as you can see on this graph, it's well after or well before 230 that the population of plankton is cut in half. So this is the amount of biodiversity that's available within our waterways. So this here has been done in the state of Ohio, and you can see that there is a decline in the amount of phytoplankton, in the amount of plankton, and an increase in the amount of phytoplankton. So this is why we have a reduce in plant content, because the increased salt levels creates a almost drought-like conditions for the plants. So it's sucking all of the water out of them so that they are not able to grow and do proper functions.
Any questions?
A little rough, but not too bad.
So since your profit and your viability is based on the cost savings of salt versus other solutions, have you priced what those other solutions would look like a magnesium calcinate or beet juice as an alternative?
Somewhat. So it's going to depend a lot, again, on the whole municipality thing. So it's going to depend on the particular grade. So our metric is to take the actual saline type and then compare that by mapping out the various areas and then looking at the recommended square footage on the packaging, and that will in turn give us a cost for a particular area.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the next group. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. We're Elemental Advances, and I'm Peyton Andesman.
My name's Matt Kelly.
I'm Owen Dooley.
And I'm Andrea Pichardo.
So our goal is going to be using the synthesis of elements to create a healing process for our local Ohio waterways. By working with local city governments to install a naturally occurring resource, such as sandstone and limestone, which are the materials that we'll be using, we're going to be attempting to fight erosion, water pollution through the implementation of those stones to the local perennial water sources. The impact will be that nearly 1/3 of Ohio residents get their drinking water from these sources, and these bodies of water also support a vast array of wildlife, including, very importantly, many endangered species, and as well as a multi-million-dollar recreational and commercial fishery company. Additionally, what we will be offering a specialization in the scientific approach to ensure the safety of habitats during installation, and we are going to understand how these complex ecosystems work, which is going to be a huge factor in why we are going to be contracted to work with these waterways. Our team is going to be a team of environmental biologists, a chemistry specialist, and an outreach and communications coordinator.
So both of these stones hold water really well, which makes them good aquifers. They're both highly porous, so as water passes through, contaminants get trapped inside the stones and are filtered from the water. Limestone also has a very alkaline pH, so it can help with neutralizing acidic polluted water sources. Sandstone also has a low impact over its whole life. Extraction techniques have evolved to sort of minimize impact on ecosystems in local habitats, as long as proper quarrying procedures are followed. And then sandstone extraction also has a lower carbon impact than other building materials by comparison. And after the installation of the stones, we will also continue to test the water quality to ensure a positive impact on the water source.
So our customer approach that will be mainly contracted by local municipal governments. This will be done through our outreach specialist who will be connecting with the city governments throughout the state of Ohio. And part of the funding, which we'll apply for a loan for, will be for conducting preliminary testing on these water sources, in which we'll travel to many of these concentrated water sources and identify the most polluted and the ones needing the most attention, so that when we approach these local governments, we're not saying, hey, here's why you should hire us. We're going to say, we've conducted research, here's the data, and your county is a main factor of the problems of the contaminants and the pollution. We want to help you, and here's what we can do. So small sources like the Delaware Run, which is presently unhealthy, have the ability to impact the city water quality, environmental, and public health, and access to economy, recreational activities. So
one of the great things about our mission is that everything can be sourced locally. Sandstone and limestone are both found in Ohio, and there are lots of quarries that we can choose from to source our materials. It's also a lot cheaper than many stones. It's about $200 per pound, or per ton, excuse me. So we have lots of options that we can choose from. We also hope to source recycled limestone and, sandstone, excuse me, from things such as building renovations, botched architecture, things such as that.
We're also going to be adding something similar to an Adopt a Highway option. So what this will be is going to be an Adopt a Waterway local communities will be able to donate to these things, local individuals that care about their city, and we'll be able to source some unique funding streams to be able to help launch our programming by donation and offset costs of the city governments that might be hesitant to invest in something like this.
So in conclusion, Elemental Advances offers a simple, natural, long-term solution to this big problem.
in improving local water quality but also supporting ecosystem structures. Our business will work towards this big problem by working with smaller scale water systems and benefiting both the environment as well as human health. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. Can you maybe help me visualize what that looks like? So say I have a county that has some polluted water that came and tested that sort of stuff, and you're going to bring in limestone or sandstone. So like, what's the process? Is it like mixing that in with what's currently there? Are you adding to it? Like, can you help me understand that?
Absolutely. So the rock type that we're going to be getting, it's not going to be like boulders. We're not going to need something like a crane to install these things. We will be hiring a labor crew, which is part of our budgeted costs, and those will be installed along the banks of the stream. And important factor of why us is that we have that knowledge of these ecosystems, of not disturbing something like stream flow, or being able to identify, say, hey, that's an egg nest for this endangered creature. Let's not squish it. So that's a big part of why we're marketing our scientific approach and environmental specialist, and why that is our team, because anybody can lay rocks, but the implementation of these smaller kind of sized stones, working with the porous structure of those stones and the alkaline features of the limestone to neutralize the acidity, those can be laid near the banks in the very shallow water, so we won't need anything like a dive team. And what that will do is help fight the erosion of the banks, create even new structures for things like spawning animals, the fish, things like that, to have even natural resources for them to create safe spaces, and all the time working towards a natural filtering process without the installation of something like human-made huge pipes. And if, you know, the city ever decided they wanted to stop investing in this, leaving that there would not cause any harm to the waterway, because it's a natural element being introduced to the waterway system.
So this is more of a repeat process that would probably something that happened over time.
Yes, it does happen over time, and also we'll be offering the contractual services to be able to return and continue testing the water and make any adjustments as needed.
So, real quick question. As you install these, obviously waterways move naturally. By installing these barriers, you're going to impede upon that natural movement. Is there any thought afterward to remove those as the waterways have been cleaned up and reusing that product, or what's your thoughts there?
They're absolutely reusable, because the rocks act as a mechanical filtration system, and it would take thousands and thousands of years for them to, you know, degrade. So with our services where they can bring us back to adjust as needed, we will be the primary kind of caretakers of this system, and with the specialization of our team kind of understanding the way that the water systems work and the way that the environment interacts with them, that will be part of our contractual process with these cities to be able to provide that long needed maintenance as it appears. And that's how we'll keep them coming back.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Casper.
And I'm Jocelyn Weaver, and our business structure is mercury reduction in the Ohio River. Mercury is a significant neurotoxin that poses a threat to both human health and ecosystem health. There have been multiple studies that show that it is very dangerous, and yet multiple companies are depositing mercury right into the Ohio River every single day. In 2017, a company, a coal factory in Moscow, Ohio, dumped 100 pounds of mercury directly into the Ohio River, yet was still in compliance with the EPA. So why are we not just throwing restrictions on that? That's because there's controversy over the main source of pollution, and that's between airborne sources and then wastewater point sources. So there's devastating effects when mercury is in the water. Fish bioaccumulate the mercury, and this is causing harm to humans because as humans eat the fish, that can come into us. And there's multiple fish consumption advisories in states bordering the Ohio River, eating 1 fish a month, 2 fish a month. Some species you can't even eat it at all. This map shows 34 samples of fish tissue that were taken that were over the EPA's safety threshold of 0.3 milligrams per kilogram. So we can see that this is a widespread issue. So how are we going to take the mercury out of the water? We're going to use the absorption. Essentially, we're going to have a system where water flows through, and we're going to have our absorbent material, which is going to be activated carbon. As the water flows through, the contaminated molecules, which will be mercury, will get caught by the activated carbon, and the rest of the water will flow through. This is the most cost-effective way to remove mercury from the water, as the only real upkeep is continuing to buy the activated carbon and replacing it. The GAC system stands for granulated activated carbon, which is used in wastewater treatment. And once we collect the mercury, it will then need to get purified.
So our business model centers around a strategic partnership with Bethlehem Apparatus, who is a current leader in mercury recycling. They have over 6 decades of experience in this industry, and they use a patented quadruple distillation purification process, which gives a yield of 99.9995% pure mercury, which is up to standard with the American Chemical Society grade and the dental standards. We chose this company due to their environmental responsibility and their expertise, so that we can ensure that when the mercury comes out of the water, it will never be reintroduced back into the environment. So the companies that we'll be selling to require high purity mercury, which is what we will get from Bethlehem Apparatus, notably in the research and the dental industries. In the research, for research purposes, they'll use mercury for a wide variety of experiments due to mercury's different properties and unique properties. And also in the dentistry unit, they'll use it for dental amalgam, which is a way to help fill cavities. And this will not only fill a supply need, but it will also help with environmental preservation because we're recycling the mercury and then reselling it to these companies. So here's a quick look at our revenue stream. Using the 1 to 2 GAC machines, we estimate that we can use about 2.3 pounds of mercury per day, which comes out to 850 pounds of mercury per year. At a market price of $250 per pound, that gives us a total revenue of $212,500 per year. Obviously, this will not all be profit. We have costs involved. We split it into one-time expenses and then yearly expenses. Our one-time expenses will come with a building and then the equipment that we need to put inside that building to keep operations up and running, such as the GAC machines. Our yearly expenses, as you can see by the pie chart, dominated by our partnership. We plan on giving about 50% of our revenue or profit to our partner. We also have our activated carbon, and then we have a bunch of miscellaneous things, mostly dominated by taxes and shipping and handling units. In the United States, the sale and shipment of mercury is highly regulated, so we will need to take on that cost and that risk, totaling up to about $130,000 worth of yearly expenses. So if we don't take into account our one-time expenses at the beginning for our startup, it comes out to about a profit of $70,000 to $90,000 per year.
So just to recap, this is our overall business plan, is to obtain water from the Ohio River, cleanse it using the absorption method, obtain the mercury byproduct, sell it to customers, and create a better environment.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, my first major question is that I too would like to clean up the rivers and streams with an ability to purify our stormwater. My question is with the feasibility of being able to handle that massive amount of water that you would have to run through these filtration processes. Did you take a moment to investigate where that's been done elsewhere?
We don't know of specific places elsewhere, but we are thinking of, we're going to be on the water, and then we're just going to take a divot of the water and process depending on how much we can get. Because at first our thinking was, well, is there enough mercury to be had? But there is. I mean, there was 3,000 pounds of mercury just pumped into the water in, 2020, I think. And the real thing is how many machines are we going to have, what's the facility, and we're going to have to start small, and then over time we can grow due to profit.
So are you looking at mobile solutions or a physical plant in a single location?
We were hoping for a physical plant in the singular location, and then once we start up, maybe an expansion throughout because obviously the Ohio River is a very long river working throughout the system itself, but starting up just in one location, yes.
Do you have any identification on where you would put your physical plant? Would you put it closer towards some of those areas in eastern Ohio where a lot of the mercury levels are higher, or would you kind of concentrate it down towards larger populations like Cincinnati or Dayton?
Yeah, if the map showed, what was that, Indiana, we looked up, because that's where we were looking at the prices for the factories. That's where there's, and also like we were thinking downstream just so we could like catch more, but there's a town in Indiana that we were looking at.
Hello everyone, my name is Amariris. I'm an anthropology and zoology student here at Ohio Wesleyan, and today I'm going to be showing you why bloom to hues is the most viable source to solve Lake Erie's algae bloom issue. So before we begin, what are algae blooms or harmful algae blooms? Well, these are the explosive growth of cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae. They typically occur in the warm shallow waters, which is why Lake Erie is where we usually see them, and they usually bloom and peak in mid-August and September. As the name suggests, these blooms have harmful algae effects, one of which is hypoxia, which essentially creates dead zones. So when these blooms move due to wind currents towards the eastern sides of the basin where the water is a little bit cooler, they sink and decompose. This process absorbs all the oxygen and releases cyanotoxins such as microcystin, which increases the enzyme activity, destroying the liver, kidneys, and gills of the surrounding organisms, overall reducing the water quality, which disproportionately affects minority communities. So how does bloom to hues help prevent this? Well, we turn this algae into algae pigments and milk-based paints. This formula is 100% biodegradable as we use natural ingredients such as the algae pigment, milk powder, and calcium hydroxide, also known as lime powder. This formula is durable as we have seen this time and time again in prehistoric cave sites that have dated back before the domestication of animals. It's strong enough to seal the paint without wrecking your paintbrushes, and it's also sustainable due to its powder form, so you only use what you need by just adding water. So I just want to clarify that this is not a new idea. This is something that we have seen time and time again, especially in Denmark, which ranks #1 in not only sustainability but carbon neutrality. And Catherine Larsen, the lady in the corner, is a testament to that. She's actually been helping me work on this project as she's a Danish architect who focuses on creating algae milk-based paints. So why is this appealing? This is appealing because we not only offer our customers an opportunity to purchase sustainable objects, but we also help them be a part of the solution of helping Lake Erie's pollution problem. By capitalizing on this demand, we create a strong market presence, which is why we want to launch our product to local farmer and art markets, meeting our target audience, which are DIY enthusiasts, entry-level artists, and hobbyists seeking a sustainable option. Social media also offers a unique opportunity to interact with consumers directly, as we can advertise our products across various platforms. So let's talk about some financial logistics. Because we're using the same methods to extract this algae as spirulina powder, another type of cyanobacteria in the Philippines, the process of turning algae into pigment is relatively cheap, and our anticipated expenses will only be towards getting the powdered milk, the calcium hydroxide, and recyclable packaging materials. So a typical natural pigment will cost roughly $750 to $950 for 100 grams, while milk paints for 5 ounces cost $25 to $32. So, because we believe that accessibility to sustainable products should be our priority, we plan to sell our pigments $6 for 100 grams and our milk pigments $21 for 5 ounces. Now, we are not without our limitations. Our color range is very small. With this additional funding, we would be able not only to create a wide variety of products, including other natural-based pigments, such as achote or saffron, but we'll be able to increase our range by creating algae-based plastics or bioplastic paintbrushes. So in conclusion, join me and Bloom to Hues to not only paint a sustainable tomorrow, but to continue help mitigate the effects of Lake Erie. Thank you.
So at this point, do you know, is there anyone else doing something similar to this, or are there other products like this on the market that you would have to look at that maybe I didn't catch there, so.
Yes. So in Europe, specifically, this is a larger market as opposed to over here. This, if you see in the corner, it says Argot Decor, which is a French-based algae paint that's used for the interior. At the bottom, right here, there is a man who is painting. He's a Chinese artist named Wenda, who creates these experiences where you paint with algae, since harmful algae blooms are an issue. And then, of course, you have Catherine Larson, who I discussed, who I'm currently working with, who uses these paints for her projects regarding architecture.
So these are paints you could work indoors or outdoors?
Yes.
I got you.
Do you have cost of how much this product is versus what its competition would be?
So in the underneath where it says cost structure, so typical natural pigments would be $750 to $950 for 100 grams, while milk paint itself costs $25 to $32 for 5 ounces of milk paint, which, and once you add water, it turns into a pint. So we plan to sell ours for $6 for 100 grams of the natural pigment, and then $21 for 5 ounces or 1 pint. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes for the judges to deliberate, and then we'll announce our winners. Hope you'll stick around. I know there's more sessions coming up at 11, but we're close. You can get wherever you're going in 1 or 2 minutes, so hang out with us for a little bit. While we're in our intermission, let me do another plug for Latham Bishop Ventures, which is what Destiny Coleman was telling you about at the very beginning. This is our program to build interest in entrepreneurship and to help you along as you develop those interests. Just by being here today, you are already part of that program. You're encountering some entrepreneurial ideas. If this is something that's exciting to you, I encourage you to explore the class offerings that we have, and also to talk with me or somebody else in the Economics and Business Department, or Phil Smith over at the deck, about how we can set you up with some coaching, with some business plan development, and maybe even some resources beyond that, perhaps integrating your interests into your academic study with credit. So lots of opportunities to explore entrepreneurship here. All right, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. So, our judges, after careful deliberation and debate, we've got our top three, our three winners. And congratulations to everybody just by being in the competition. You should be proud of that. Again, there were 11 proposals altogether. 5 of you were selected, so excellent work. So in third place, we have Saline Solutions. In second place, we have Blooms to Hughes. And in first place, in the winner of the Woltemade Big Problem Challenge, Terra Buffer. All right. Would the Terra Buffer team like to come up and receive the giant check? Maybe the judges can come and get a picture with them.
There you are.
Thank you for coming. So we'd like all the contestants to come up for a picture, please.